In this section, we're going to get into building a HTTP or web server on an EC2 Spot instance. How will this work? Well, in terms of architecture, first we'll spin up a Cloud9 development environment, and then we'll also register a new PEM file. That PEM file will allow us to make an SSH connection to the Spot instance that we'll spin up. Then we'll go into the console and tell the Spot request to launch a new Spot instance. And this allows us to really get a good savings, like maybe pennies on the dollar. Let's say it's 80% off to launch a Spot instance. It's a little bit like a bargain store, where if you want to prototype things, a Spot instance is a great way to try out a resource, and it'll launch a virtual machine that we can do some testing on. So then we'll go through and we'll install a web service, get it running, and then test it out in our browser, and that'll give us a full prototype. So this is really the idea here, is when you're building things in the cloud, if you do want to use a virtual machine, this is going to be a great way to use this formula, and it's something that you can repeat over and over again. Let's get started at how we can set up this Linux-based web service. First up, we'll need to create a PEM key. So I'm going to go to the console here and say create key pair, and I'll make this key pair called hello web service, and I'll leave everything default here and create this key pair. This will allow me to download this and put it into our Cloud9 environment. So I'll go over to Cloud9 now, refresh this, and upload that PEM file. So we'll go to File, Upload, Local Files, and put that in there. Great. Now, because I've done that, I'll be able to do an SSH connection. So we've been able to get these first three steps completed fairly quickly. What I'll want to do, although I didn't do step 2, we'll also want to create a security group. So next up, I'm going to go to the EC2 instance console here, and I'm going to go down to security groups. And security groups allow us to open up specific ports, and we want to open up port 22 for SSH and port 80 for the web service. So we'll go here and we'll call this hello Spot web service, and we'll say this is for a Spot web service. Great. I can leave everything default here. Now the only thing I need to do is add these 2 inbound rules. So the first inbound rule would be port 22, and what we want to do is let everybody make a port 22 connection, and then I'll also make another one for port 80. This will allow me to test out a web service, and websites typically do want to have everyone have access to them unless they're a special internal web service. Great. Now that I've created those 2 security groups, inbound rules, I can now use that and the PEM file when I launch an instance. So we're pretty close to being ready to go here. I'm going to go over to Spot request now and tell it that I want to launch a new instance. Let's go ahead and go to Spot request here, and I'm going to say request Spot instance. And I'll also say I want to do a, I can select big data workload. That's a good template. And I want to change this AMI here so that it's set to Amazon Linux 2. Let's go ahead and set this up. And this looks good. We got Amazon Linux 2 here, quick start. And if I scroll down here, the main thing that I'm going to need to make sure that I change is this key pair, right? We know that we have one called hello, so I'm going to go ahead and find that. There we go, hello web service. So that allows me to SSH. And then the other thing is that I'm going to need to change the security groups, because we know that we need to be able to SSH into this machine. So here we go. Here's hello Spot web service. There's that group we set up. And from here, I'm pretty much ready to go. I can leave this at 1 target. I don't need to launch more than 1. And you can see here that I'm going to get roughly between 70 to 80% off. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and launch this. And what will happen is when the request is submitted here, you'll see it'll go into the submitted state. And if I click on the request ID, it'll show me more information about it and whether it's been fulfilled yet. Typically what I do is I'll go to the instances now and I'll look for the instance state. And you can see here that it's actually in pending state. So we can refresh here and hopefully, there we go. It looks like it's starting to initialize. So from now, I can actually name this something. I think that's always a good idea, is to go through here and change the name, and we'll call this Spot Web Service. That way I know what it is and I can easily terminate it later. And then I'll also go and say connect, and it'll give me the SSH connection instructions. So step one, they want me to run this chmod command, chmod 400. So I'll go back to my Cloud 9 environment here and I'll run that particular command. Let me just move this a little bit up here so it's at the same level. We'll do this. There we go. So we'll say chmod 400 hello web service pem. Great. And then the next step will be to actually connect to it. So I can go through here and copy this, and it will allow me to use that PIM to connect to this machine. Great, let's go ahead and do that. Looks like things are able to connect here. And so then I'll go through here and type these commands I had later. So first thing is I'll update the software on this machine. There we go. So this will update things here. That looks good. And while that's updating, the other thing that I'll do next is I'll want to install this HTTP service. So I'll kind of get that teed up. There we go. Next step, let's install that web service. Great, that installs Apache. And then we can start Apache. So we can go right here and go back. Perfect. So now that the web service is started, what I can do is actually test it out. And we know that that web service should be available here. If I go back to this instance and I go to this public address, I should be able to put this into a web browser. So let's go ahead and do that. And there we go. We've got a test page. So we've actually got things running. Now, if I wanted to add more content to this, what I could do is I could go to this directory and fix it and change it up. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and change some code here in the var www.html directory. How would we do this? So first up, I would run this command, which would allow the EC2 user to become as part of the Apache group. There we go. Next up, I would tell that new permission level to own those web directories. That's where the data is served out of. And then I'm going to add these write permissions here, group write permissions. So that basically, in a nutshell, it'll make it so that when I create a directory, they'll be created in a way that won't cause file permissions issues. So if I go into var www here, we should see there's a file called HTML. And what I could just do is say touch index.html, HTML here, and I could edit it, and we'll just put some HTML in here, HTML, and we'll say here, maybe just a paragraph tag, just say hi. And then in paragraph tag, there we go. And then maybe just close this out. We'll just say, close out this HTML tag. Perfect. Okay, this looks like it's good to go. And then I should just be able to restart this web service. Let's just, let's see if this restart command will work. Looks like it does. And if I go back here, do we have a new web page? There we go, we have hi. So pretty straightforward as well to do this the old-fashioned way and to put a file onto a web service. There's pros and cons to this approach. The pro is that you have complete control and it's relatively straightforward to create web apps. The con is that this server is always running and you're paying for it, unlike a static hosted website under S3.